Gold diggers. When rich guy left you broke, how did you react when X became millionaire? Story 1. I met Carter at a rooftop bar with a view that screamed, "I'm important." He wore a watch that could have paid my rent for a year and talked like every sentence ended in a handshake. I wasn't ashamed to admit I liked the safety of that world. I played the role perfectly, laughing at his jokes, touching his arm at the right moments, posting just enough to make other women jealous. Then his safety got weird. He started testing me. Let's keep it low-key. Then, "I'm worried you only like me for my money." I'd roll my eyes and say, "You're not that rich," while he smirked like he'd caught me lying. One Friday, I showed up at his condo and the doorman said, "He moved out, no warning, no goodbye." He blocked me everywhere. 2 weeks later, I got a short email from a lawyer. "Do not contact Mr. Hail again." That was it. I had already turned down shifts, opportunities, even a lease renewal because Carter had it handled. Suddenly, I had nothing handled. I spiraled. I sold bags. I borrowed money from friends I'd barely spoken to in months. I told myself he'd come back when he cooled off. A year later, I saw him on a business podcast clip. New haircut, calmer eyes, talking about cutting distractions and building discipline. Comments called him inspirational. I wanted to scream. This was the same guy who left me with overdraft fees. 2 months after that, I ran into his ex, his real ex, the one he'd called crazy. She looked peaceful. She said, "He did it to you too?" Like it was a club. Then she smiled and added, "Don't worry. He gets off on watching people scramble." That night, I didn't cry. I opened my notes app and wrote down every detail. Dates, gifts, the promises, the tests. Because I realized something. If he wanted me erased, he didn't get to control the narrative. I wasn't going to chase him for money. I was going to outlive the story he tried to write for me. Loudly. Story 2. I didn't think I was a gold digger. I told myself I was strategic. If a man wanted to spoil me, why would I fight it? When I started dating Malik, he was the definition of flashy. Rented Lambos, champagne in clubs, investor in his bio. My friends warned me it looked like smoke and mirrors. I ignored them because the mirrors were expensive. Malik moved fast. "Baby, I'll take care of you." He paid my phone, my nails, even my mom's grocery bill once. I posted him just enough to make it official, not enough to scare off his business persona. Then I did what I always do when things feel too good. I tested him. I asked for a bigger apartment. He said yes. I asked for a trip. He said yes. Then one morning, I woke up to 47 missed calls from unknown numbers. My bank app showed a chargeback for the rent he paid, another for the trip deposit. My landlord was banging on the door like I'd committed a crime. Malik's number went straight to voicemail. Turns out he hadn't paid anything. He used temporary cards, shady transfers, and a fake identity. When it all reversed, it reversed onto me. I was the one on the lease. My name, my signature, my problem. I lost my apartment. My credit got trashed. I had to move back in with my aunt who made me sleep on a pull-out couch and reminded me daily that pretty doesn't pay bills. I wanted revenge so badly I could taste it. I looked him up constantly, waiting to see him crash. And then, 2 years later, he popped up again. This time in a legit article. Young entrepreneur sells app for $8.2 million. It was Malik. Same grin. New last name. Like he'd shed the mess like old skin. I stared at that headline until my eyes burned. Then I did something that surprised even me. I laughed. Because if he could reinvent himself after burning everything down, so could I. I filed disputes, rebuilt my credit, took a boring job, and learned money the hard way. Numbers, contracts, receipts. And the first time a guy tried to impress me with a watch, I asked him to show me his tax return. The look on his face was worth every night on that pull-out couch. Story 3. The first time I saw Jonah, he was sitting in first class like it was his birthright. I was in economy, but I still noticed him because he kept glancing back at me like he was shopping. When we landed, his assistant, yes, assistant, handed him a coat, and I decided right there I wanted that kind of life. I slid into his orbit through mutuals. I said all the right things. I loved ambition. I hated drama. I was tired of broke men. Jonah ate it up. He took me to restaurants without prices. He bought me jewelry, just because. I started posting luxury shots with my hand casually angled, like I wasn't screaming, "Look at me." Then he asked me to sign an NDA. He said it like it was romantic. "I'm private. If you care about me, you'll respect that." I hesitated, and he said, smiling, "It's just to protect us." I signed. Worst decision of my life. Because once he had that paper, he got cruel. He'd cancel plans last minute, then send his driver to drop off flowers like I was supposed to be grateful. He started making comments about my background, my taste, my value. The gifts stopped feeling like gifts and started feeling like a leash. One night, after I confronted him about another woman showing up in his tagged photos, he said, "You're replaceable." Then he tossed a small envelope at me. Inside was a check, 1 month of rent, and a note. "This is your transition package. Don't contact me again." I was shaking with rage, but I was also terrified. I'd arranged my life around him. I'd let my savings dry up because I thought I'd level up permanently. 6 months later, I saw him on a billboard downtown. Not even for business. He was the face of a self-made campaign. He'd sold his company and was suddenly the golden boy millionaire everyone worshipped. I wanted to break something. Instead, I did the only thing I could. I used what I learned. I stopped chasing men and started chasing leverage. I took a job at a firm where I watched rich people protect themselves. I learned how they write contracts, how they hide assets, how they control stories. And the next time someone tried to hand me an NDA in the name of love, I smiled like Jonah did and said, "Perfect. My lawyer will review it." The silence was delicious. Story 4. People think gold diggers are lazy. I wasn't lazy. I was exhausted. I grew up watching my mom work 2 jobs and still get yelled at by a man who contributed nothing. So when I met Victor, older, polished, generous, I told myself I was breaking the cycle. He liked that I was young and fun. I liked that he was stable. It was a deal. Victor wasn't flashy. He was discreet rich. Country club rich. Let's not post everything rich. I moved into his house and started living like a wife without the ring. Cooking, organizing, hosting his friends, smiling through comments like, "You're lucky he chose you." Then, out of nowhere, Victor started talking about simplifying. He said he wanted to sell the house, move into something smaller, focus on health. I thought, midlife crisis. I tried to keep him interested. I bought lingerie. I planned trips. I played every card. One morning I came home and my key didn't work. My clothes were in boxes on the porch like I was a bad tenant. His housekeeper stood there looking uncomfortable and said, "Mr. Victor told me to give you this." It was an envelope. Inside, a cashier's check for $1,000 and a note that said, "This arrangement is over. Please respect my decision." I sat on the curb and stared at my boxes, feeling like I'd been erased with a pen stroke. Weeks later, I found out why. He'd been quietly broke. Not broke, but drowning. The rich life was debt, loans, appearances. And when he cut me off, he cut off the last expense he could control. I should have felt satisfied, right? Karma. Justice. Except I didn't. Because I was the one who paid the price. New apartment, new job, starting from zero while he walked away still respected. Then, a year later, I saw his name again. This time in a local business award. Victor had partnered with a younger investor and flipped a property portfolio. He was suddenly a millionaire for real. The same man who boxed my life like trash. I didn't chase him. I didn't beg. I sent one message. "Congratulations. I hope you never treat another person like an expense report." He replied instantly, "You'll be fine." And that's when I knew. He didn't leave me broke because he had to. He left me broke because he could. Story 5. I used to joke that I had a type. Men with money and guilt. The guilty ones spent more to prove they were good guys. That's how I ended up with Ethan. Ethan was newly divorced, eager to feel young again, and obsessed with being appreciated. I was very good at appreciation. I'd listen to him rant about his ex, tell him he deserved peace, kiss him like I was grateful. He started paying for everything without me asking. He even offered to invest in my little online boutique. I let him. Of course I did. He wired me money to buy inventory and I thought, this is it. This is my safety net. Then, a month later, he accused me of using him in the middle of a restaurant, loudly, like he wanted everyone to hear it. I was mortified and angry, so I snapped back, "If you're so worried, stop paying." He went quiet, stared at me for a long second and said, "Done." The next morning, my boutique account was frozen. The bank flagged his wire as fraudulent because he filed a dispute, claiming I tricked him into sending it. My landlord called about late rent because Ethan had been paying it directly and suddenly stopped. My phone bill bounced. Everything I'd let him handle collapsed in 1 week. I texted him, furious. He replied with a single line, "Actions have consequences." I wanted to ruin him. I wanted to call his ex, his boss, anyone who'd listen. But I also knew the truth. I had built my whole life on someone else's wallet and called it security. So I did the humiliating thing. I took a second job, sold off the boutique inventory at a loss, moved into a cheaper place, and started over. No sugarcoating, no shortcuts. 2 years later, I went to a networking event for small business owners because I'd rebuilt my boutique the boring way, slowly. with actual profit. A man walked in and everyone swarmed him. Guess who it was? Ethan. Not just doing fine, Ethan had turned his post-divorce meltdown into a brand. Podcast, book deal, men's mindset coaching. The MC introduced him as a self-made millionaire. He spotted me across the room and smiled like we were a funny memory. He walked up and said, "Wow, look at you. I knew you'd land on your feet." I looked him dead in the eye and said, "You didn't break me. You just forced me to stop being stupid." His smile twitched. For the first time, he didn't have a comeback. And honestly, that was worth more than any check he ever wrote. Story 6. I wasn't subtle. I met Henry at a charity gala and treated it like a job interview. Laugh at the right jokes. Mention big dreams. Look impressed when he said the word portfolio. He loved it. He loved being seen as the savior with a black AMEX. For 6 months, I lived like a curated Instagram reel. Weekend trips, designer bags, accidental mirror selfies in his penthouse. Then Henry started asking questions that sounded innocent but weren't. How much do you have saved? If I disappeared tomorrow, what would you do? I'd tease him, call him paranoid, kiss him until he forgot. He didn't forget. One morning, I woke up and my card didn't work. I tried the other one. Declined. I called him. Straight to voicemail. By noon, the building told me my name wasn't on the guest list anymore. My things? We can schedule a pickup. I stood on the sidewalk in heels, suitcase in hand, pretending it was fine while my stomach collapsed. Later, I got an email. I've decided to date someone with their own foundation. This is over. Not even a goodbye. Just a decision, like I was a subscription he canceled. I told everyone he was cruel. I made him the villain in my head so I wouldn't have to admit I'd handed him the remote to my life. 2 years later, I saw him again. On a giant LED screen in Times Square, smiling beside a headline about his company's acquisition. Young CEO becomes millionaire. People cheered. I felt sick. That man had left me arguing with my landlord over a $200 late fee, and now he was being celebrated like a hero. I did the only petty thing that didn't ruin me. I walked into the same charity gala the next year, not as a date, as a vendor. I had a real business then, small but mine. And when Henry saw me across the room, his face flickered like he'd seen a ghost. He started toward me with that confident, I'm in control smile. I smiled back, professional, calm, and said, "Sorry, sir. The VIP section is for donors." And for once, he was the one who didn't know where he belonged. Story 7. I chose Leon because he was newly rich and insecure about it. Those are the easiest. He had money, but he still needed permission to feel important. I gave him that permission every day. He'd buy me jewelry and watch my face like a kid waiting for applause. I'd gasp, hug him, post it, tag the brand. He'd glow. I thought I was controlling the relationship. Then his accountant got involved. Suddenly, Leon started talking about budgeting and boundaries. He asked me to pay for my own Uber. I laughed like it was a joke. He didn't laugh back. He looked embarrassed, like he'd finally noticed what everyone else saw. A week later, he invited me to dinner, ordered a bottle of wine, and calmly said, "I think we moved too fast. I'm going to take a step back." I smiled, pretending I was mature, and said, "Sure, babe." Then I went home and realized my apartment, my temporary apartment, had been paid 3 months in advance by him. That advance ended in 10 days. I panicked. I called. He didn't answer. I went to his building. Security refused to let me up. I felt my pride turning into ash in my mouth. Months passed. I clawed my way back with a boring job I used to call beneath me. I told myself Leon would regret it. He didn't. He got richer. One day, I opened my phone and there he was. Front page of a local business site. Crypto guy turned real estate investor hits first million. Comments praised his discipline and glow up. I stared at the article and realized the worst part. He learned from me. I was his villain origin story. He used my greed as motivation and turned it into success. So I did something I'd never done. I messaged his accountant. Not to beg, just to ask one question. How do rich men protect themselves? The accountant replied, by dating women who don't need them. That line hurt so much I printed it out and pinned it to my wall. It became my new type. Independence. Story 8. I met Asher when he was between ventures. He wasn't broke. He was just temporarily embarrassed. He talked like success was inevitable, like the universe owed him a comeback. I believed him because I wanted to. I carried him emotionally and he carried me financially. Rent, trips, little surprises that made me feel chosen. When he was stressed, I'd say, "It's okay, babe. One day we'll laugh about this." He'd squeeze my hand and promise, "When I hit, you're set for life." Then his dad died. Suddenly there was an inheritance, lawyers, family drama. Asher got cold. He stopped letting me sit in on calls. He started taking walks to talk privately. He would come back with red eyes and say, "You wouldn't understand." I understood plenty. Money was coming, and he didn't want to share. 2 weeks before the probate hearing, he ended things like he was canceling plans. "I need to focus. This relationship is a distraction," I cried, but he didn't flinch. He left me with nothing but a toothbrush at his place and a sinking feeling in my chest. I called him a monster. I told friends he used me. I rehearsed speeches for when he came crawling back. He didn't crawl. A year later, Asher's name popped up in an article. He'd taken his inheritance, invested it smart, and sold a company. New millionaire under 30. He looked polished, smiling, surrounded by men in suits. Like he'd never once promised me, set for life. I went to the comments and saw a woman tagged, "So proud of you, babe. New girlfriend. New partner." Same script. I didn't DM her. I didn't warn her. I just closed my phone and felt something unfamiliar. Relief. Because if he had stayed, I would have kept living like a passenger. That night, I opened a savings account. Real one. No man's name, no promises, no one day. Just numbers, slowly stacking, like proof I existed without him. Story 9. I dated Miles because he was safe. Not emotionally safe, financially safe. He was the type who paid silently. Rent, groceries, even my car insurance. I let him because it felt like winning after years of struggling. The problem with Miles was he watched everything. He noticed what I ordered. He remembered what I didn't say. He'd smile politely while his eyes calculated. When I joked, "You're basically my husband," he didn't laugh. He said, "Marriage is a contract, like love was paperwork." One day, he asked me to move in. I said yes immediately because I saw the upgrade. He nodded and said, "Great. We'll do it properly." Properly meant a cohabitation agreement. "Just standard," he said. "It protects us both." I didn't read it. I signed it because I didn't want to look greedy. 3 months later, after a fight about me flirting at a party, he pointed to the door and said, "We're done. Pack your things." I screamed. I cried. I threw every emotional weapon I had. He stayed calm, walked to a drawer, and slid the agreement across the counter. "You have 24 hours. You're not entitled to anything here." I felt stupid in a way that burned. I left with my clothes, my makeup, and humiliation. 2 years later, I saw him on LinkedIn, of all places. Excited to announce I've crossed my first $1 million in net worth. People were congratulating him like he'd invented kindness. I wanted to comment, "Congrats on being heartless." Instead, I did something smarter. I read every post he'd ever written. He talked about discipline, boundaries, contracts, risk management. And I realized, he treated relationships like business because he'd been hurt before. I just happened to be the last lesson. So I learned too. Next time a man offered to take care of me, I smiled and said, "Perfect." Put it in writing. If love couldn't survive clarity, it was never love, just leverage. Story 10. Everyone told me Sebastian was too rich to be real. I didn't care. I wanted real money, not real feelings. Sebastian had a lake house, a driver, and the kind of calm confidence that made people lower their voices around him. He liked that I was bold. I liked that he was consistent. It felt like an arrangement that could last forever, as long as I played my part. Then I got greedy. I pushed for a ring. Not because I loved him, but because a ring meant security. Sebastian listened quietly, then asked, "Do you want me? Or do you want my life?" I said the wrong thing. I joked, "Why not both?" thinking it was cute. He didn't smile. The next week, he simplified my access. My name disappeared from accounts. His assistant stopped answering. When I showed up at his house, the gate code didn't work. I sat outside like a rejected delivery. Hours later, he texted, "You'll get your things next week. Take care." That was all. I went through every stage. Rage, begging, bargaining, stalking his socials. I even imagined confronting him in public, making a scene, forcing him to acknowledge me. But Sebastian didn't do scenes. He did erasure. 3 years later, I saw him in an interview. He'd sold his company, started a fund, and was officially a millionaire many times over. The interviewer called him grounded, family-oriented. He smiled and said, "I learned to choose people who value me, not my wallet." I felt my stomach turn because I knew he was talking about me without saying my name. My reaction surprised me. I didn't feel hate. I felt shame. Not because I wanted money, because I wanted money more than I wanted dignity. So I started rebuilding the only thing no rich man could revoke, my reputation. I got steady work, paid off debts, kept my life quiet. And one day, when a friend tried to set me up with another Sebastian, I said, "No. I'm done auditioning for someone else's lifestyle." Story 11. I used to say I was dating up. Truth is, I was dating out of my own responsibilities. Grant was a quiet, rich type. No flashy cars, no bottle service. Just a clean suit, a black card, and a townhouse that smelled like money and restraint. He didn't buy me gifts the way other men did. He paid for problems to disappear. Dentist, handled. Parking tickets, handled. Emergency rent, handled. I started treating him like a life subscription. Then he got sick. Not dramatic, not hospital everyday sick. Just enough to scare him into looking at his life like a spreadsheet. Suddenly he wanted less noise. He started reading self-help books, waking up at 5 a.m., drinking green juice. And he started looking at me like I was part of the noise. One morning he sat me down and said calmly, "I'm cutting unnecessary expenses." I laughed, thinking he was joking. He didn't. He slid a folder across the table. Inside was a list of everything he'd paid for me over the last year. It wasn't a threat. It was a mirror. I saw myself in numbers. Rent, flights, shopping, support. "I'm not asking you to pay me back," he said. "I'm asking you to leave." I tried tears. I tried anger. I tried seduction. He stayed polite and unmoved, like customer service. I moved into a studio with mismatched furniture and a roommate who kept stealing my oat milk. I told everyone he was heartless. Then, 2 years later, Grant's face popped up in a magazine at the airport. Local investor sells steak, joins Millionaire Club. He looked healthier, sharper, almost serene, like dumping me was part of his wellness plan. My reaction wasn't jealousy. It was panic, because it hit me. He didn't become a millionaire despite cutting me off. He became one because he finally stopped funding my fantasy. That night, I opened my banking app and felt sick at my own balance. So I started paying for my own problems. Slowly. Painfully. And the first time I covered an emergency without texting a man, I cried in my car. Not because I was broke, but because I was finally free. Story 12. I met Chase when he was rebuilding. He'd lost money, lost friends, lost status. That made him hungry, and hungry men are easy to attach yourself to, because they believe loyalty is rare. I played loyal. I showed up with coffee, listened to his plans, told him his ex didn't deserve him. In return, he started paying my bills when his money finally started flowing again. "You were there when I had nothing," he'd say. "You deserve the glow up with me." Then one night I made a mistake. I bragged. We were at dinner with his business partner and I joked. I stuck around for the comeback, obviously. Everyone laughed, except Chase. His eyes went flat for half a second, like a camera shutter closing. A week later, he told me he was going on a work trip. He kissed my forehead, promised to call, and left. He didn't call. He didn't come back. Instead, I got a message from his assistant. "Please arrange a time to collect your belongings." My name was off everything. Even the Netflix password changed. I felt insulted on a microscopic level. I drove to his office, ready to blow up his life. Security wouldn't let me in. And then Chase walked out the elevator, saw me, and didn't look surprised, like he'd planned for this. "You embarrassed me," he said. "You showed my partner who you really are." I stuttered, trying to flip it. "After everything I did for you, you did it for the result," he cut in. "Not for me." 2 years later, he was all over social media. Sold his company, bought a penthouse, hit millionaire status. People commented, "You deserve it." I wanted to reply, "No, he's just careful." My reaction wasn't to expose him. I realized no one cares about the woman a rich man discards. They care about the myth. So I did the coldest thing I could. I treated my life like a business the way he did. I got certified, took a stable job, cut my own unnecessary expenses, including attention from men like Chase. If he wanted to be a lesson, fine. I'd graduate. Story 13. Evan wasn't my type, until I learned his dad owned half the city. Evan was the nice rich kid, the kind who said please to waiters and over-tipped like he wanted approval. That's the type I can work with. Dating him felt like stepping into air conditioning after a lifetime in the heat. I didn't even have to ask for things. Evan offered shopping days, weekend getaways, a credit card for emergencies. My emergency list got very creative. Then his father met me. Mr. Weller looked me up and down the way bankers look at a loan application. He smiled politely and said, "Evan is generous. Don't confuse generosity with obligation." I laughed it off. Evan got defensive. I thought I'd won. A month later, Evan sat me down, eyes red, voice shaking. "My dad thinks you're with me for money." I did the worst thing possible. I rolled my eyes and said, "Well, he's not wrong about the money being nice." Evan stared like I'd slapped him. The next day, his card was canceled. His accounts were under review. His dad had cut him off to test whether Evan was strong enough to choose his own life. I expected Evan to fight for me. Instead, he broke. I can't do this, he said. I can't lose my family. And just like that, I was out. No apology that mattered. No soft landing. His dad had controlled the board, and I was the pawn they happily removed. 2 years later, Evan was back, except not as a weak kid. He'd built a startup, made his own money, and suddenly every business blog was calling him self-made. Millionaire by 28. I nearly choked when I saw it. My reaction was ugly at first. Pure rage. I wanted to message him, so you could have fought for me after all. But then I remembered his father's words. Generosity isn't obligation. I treated Evan like a shortcut, and his family treated me like a threat. Everyone played their role. So I stopped auditioning for rich families and started building something no father could veto. Story 14. I picked Nico because he was a show-off. The kind of guy who liked taking a girl to a 5-star restaurant just to watch her act impressed. I was very good at acting impressed. Nico promised the world. He talked about our future like it was already purchased. I started saying we too. I let him pay for my lifestyle, let him take photos of me in places I couldn't afford, let him introduce me as the woman behind the man. Then one night, I caught him lying. Small lie, but it cracked everything. He wasn't rich. He was financed. Credit, leases, loans. He was basically renting a rich life. I confronted him. He snapped, "So what? You wouldn't be here if I was broke," I said. "At least I'm honest." He laughed and said, "Honest doesn't pay your rent?" 2 days later, the rent didn't get paid. His accounts got frozen. His business partner disappeared. Nico vanished like smoke and left me holding the lease in my name. I spent months drowning. Collection calls, shame, moving back with my mom. I told myself Nico would get what he deserved. And then, years later, I saw him again. This time real. He'd actually built something. A legit company. A legit exit. Headlines. Entrepreneur turned scandal into success, now millionaire. My reaction wasn't envy. It was disbelief. Because the universe felt unfair. How does the liar get the comeback? Then I remembered. He wasn't punished by the universe. He was punished by time. While he rebuilt, I sat in bitterness waiting for karma like it was a delivery. Meanwhile, he moved. So I stopped waiting. I started moving too. If the world rewards the bold, fine. I could be bold, just not stupid this time. Story 15. I dated Adrian because he was predictable. Older, divorced, rich, and guilty. Guilty men are generous. They buy silence. They buy affection. They buy the feeling that they're still lovable. Adrian paid for everything. He even offered to help me get ahead. He set me up with a small consulting job through a friend. Easy money, no effort. I thought I'd hacked life. Then his ex-wife sued him. Suddenly he was stressed, paranoid, whispering on calls. He started talking about protecting assets. One night he said, "If things get messy, I need you to be loyal." I nodded, because loyalty sounded like a paycheck. A week later, he told me he needed to simplify until the lawsuit was over. He moved money around, changed accounts, and quietly removed me from all of it. My consulting job vanished. The rent payment bounced. My card declined at a grocery store while people waited behind me. I called him furious. He answered once and said, "I can't fund distractions right now." Distractions. That was me. I went nuclear, threatened to expose him, to call his ex, to post everything. Adrian stayed calm and said, "Do what you want, but understand I can afford consequences. Can you?" That sentence shut my mouth. Because he was right. I was living on his cushion and he just pulled it away. 2 years later, the lawsuit ended. Adrian's business recovered. He sold a chunk of it and, surprise, he was officially a millionaire, publicly celebrated, smiling in photos with a new girlfriend who looked wholesome. My reaction wasn't to stalk him. It was to finally admit the truth. I'd been renting my life from a man who could evict me at any time. So I got obsessed with the one thing he couldn't take, my own income. Not glamour, not gifts, not arrangements. Real money, real control. And the next time a man tried to call me a distraction, I had enough in my own account to smile and say, "Good, distract yourself elsewhere." Story 16. I thought I'd found the perfect loophole. A rich guy who hated gold diggers. Those are the easiest to manipulate because they're always trying to prove they're too smart to be used. Trent was like that. Old money, allergic to flashy, constantly talking about character. So I performed character. I insisted on splitting small bills, acted embarrassed when he offered gifts, said things like, "I just want a simple life." Meanwhile, he paid for the big things because that was different. Rent, car note, business class because you're tired. He felt like a protector, not a wallet. Then I slipped. At brunch, his friend asked what I did for work. I laughed and said, "Mostly Trent, it was meant to be cute. Everyone chuckled. Trent didn't. His jaw tightened like I'd tapped a nerve. That night, he didn't yell. He just said, "I'm not financing disrespect." The next day, the concierge called me. Trent had revoked my building access. My things would be boxed. My name removed from everything. He even canceled my gym membership. The petty kind of cleanup that felt surgical. I tried to play the victim. I texted essays. I called from a friend's phone. He replied once, "You made me feel stupid." I don't forgive that. I moved back to my sister's couch and told myself he'd regret it. 2 years later, I saw why he never did. Trent had launched a fund, sold it, and the local paper called him the newest millionaire in the city's old money circle. They praised his discipline and strong boundaries. I almost threw my phone across the room. My reaction wasn't to beg. It was worse. I wanted to win. I wanted him to look back and think he'd misjudged me. So I stopped performing and started building. Not because I became a saint, because I got tired of being disposable. If a man could cut me off with one call, I needed my own switchboard. And the first time I paid my own rent without panic, I realized nothing is more expensive than pretending you're secure. Story 17. I was dating 2 men when I met Dominic. That's how it started. Not proud, just honest. Dominic was a tech guy with money and loneliness leaking out of him like cologne. He wanted a real connection, and I wanted a real upgrade. We both lied, just in different fonts. Dominic paid for my classes, my beauty appointments, my fresh start. He even helped me move into a better place and said, "I want you focused on your future." I told him he was different. He believed it. Then I got careless with my phone. A message popped up from another guy, something flirty and obvious, while Dominic was showing me a video. He didn't react at first. He just paused, smiled slightly and said, "Interesting." I spent the next hour trying to explain it away. Dominic listened quietly, nodded, kissed me goodbye, and told me to get home safe. By the time I got home, my banking app was in chaos. Transfers reversed. Recurring payments canceled. Even the internet bill, gone. I called him, and he answered like customer support. "I'm removing myself from obligations that aren't mine." I screamed, "You're leaving me broke." He said, "No, you were already broke. I was just hiding it." I hated him for that line because it was true. Months later, I saw him again at a conference. I was working registration in a blazer I hated, trying to look important. Dominic walked in as a speaker. People were taking photos. He'd sold his company stake. Millionaire. Standing on stage talking about integrity. I wanted to heckle him. Instead, I just stood there holding a stack of badges, feeling the weight of every shortcut I'd ever taken. After his talk, he passed by me and stopped. "Are you okay?" he asked, like he hadn't detonated my life. I wanted to say something sharp. What came out was, "I'm employed." He nodded once, like that was the point. And for the first time, I understood. He didn't cut me off to punish me. He cut me off to stop enabling me. That didn't make him a hero, but it made my choices impossible to ignore. Story 18. I didn't chase rich men. I chased status. There's a difference. And Felix came with status like a label. Private club access, art shows, charity boards. The kind of world where women smile too hard and pretend they don't notice the price tags. Felix loved showing me off, until I started showing myself off. I posted everything. The dinners, the gifts, the location tags. I wanted the world to see I'd made it. One night, he asked me to delete a story where his watch and his car plate were visible. I laughed and said, "Relax, it's just a story." He didn't laugh. "Privacy is safety," he said. A week later, his house got robbed. Felix never accused me directly, but his eyes did. He went quiet, then cold. And the next time I arrived at his place, the locks were changed. His assistant met me with a box and a polite smile like I was an HR problem. Felix called later and said, "You're reckless." "I can't afford reckless." I snapped, "But you can afford everything else, right?" He said, "Not you." I lost more than him. I lost the network. Those women I'd smiled with? Gone. Invitations stopped. My social access evaporated overnight. And with it, the deals and freebies I'd been writing. 2 years later, Felix was in the news. His security company went viral after a big contract, and suddenly he was a millionaire. Articles praised his obsession with privacy. I wanted to scream because I was the reason he became obsessed. My reaction was not to apologize. I knew it wouldn't matter. Instead, I became the kind of person who could walk into a room without a man vouching for her. I learned something Felix understood better than I did. In that world, visibility is currency, but so is control. And I'd handed mine away for likes. Story 19. I knew Warren was married when I met him. He didn't hide it. He just made it sound like a technicality. We're separated. It's complicated. She doesn't understand me. I knew the script. I also knew the payoff. Married men spend more because they're buying risk. Warren rented me an apartment for my peace. He gave me cash instead of cards. He said it was safer. I didn't question it because the cash felt like power. Then his wife found out. Not from me. Never from me. From a credit report alert, of all things. She confronted him, and suddenly Warren was panicking, calling me at 2 a.m., saying we had to lay low. A week later, he met me in a parking lot and handed me an envelope. Inside was $2,000 and a note with an address for where my things would be shipped. "What is this?" I asked. "This is me protecting my life," he said, eyes hard. "You were fun. Now you're a liability." I said, "You're leaving me broke." He shrugged. "I'm leaving you alive." I hated him for acting like he'd done me a favor. I also hated myself for believing a secret could ever be stable. 3 years later, Warren's name popped up again. Divorce finalized, business booming, sold his firm, millionaire. His wife took him to the cleaners publicly and he still came out shining. Meanwhile, I was just the unnamed side note everyone would judge. My reaction surprised me. I felt relief that I didn't have to be his secret anymore. I took the money I had left, moved cities, and started living like my choices could survive daylight. Because the truth is, getting cut off by a married man is humiliating, but being tied to him forever is worse. Story 20. I thought I was smarter than everyone because I never fell for love. I fell for contracts. When I met Spencer, I treated the relationship like a negotiation. He was a finance guy, cold, precise, obsessed with fairness. Perfect. I told him up front. I wanted stability. He respected honesty. He even praised me for it. "Most women pretend," he said. "You're direct." He started paying for things, but he made it feel like a partnership. I cover rent. You handle groceries? Fine. I pay for travel. You plan it? Fine. I liked the structure. It felt safe. Then he introduced a new structure. "Let's formalize." He handed me a document like it was romantic. It outlined what he would pay for, what I would contribute, and what happened if we broke up. It was basically a relationship prenup. I signed smug, thinking I'd won the game. 6 months later, he ended things with the same calm tone he used to talk about taxes. "This isn't efficient," he said. "We want different outcomes." I laughed, because I thought he'd at least feel something. He didn't. He just pointed at the document. "You have 2 weeks to transition." As agreed, I walked out furious, but I couldn't even claim betrayal. I'd signed the rules. 2 years later, Spencer's face was everywhere in finance circles. He'd exited a startup, hit millionaire status, and was doing interviews about rational decision-making. I watched one clip where he said, "Emotion is expensive." My reaction wasn't rage. It was clarity. I realized I'd tried to play his game without having my own board. I'd relied on his structure instead of building mine. So I started building. Skills, savings, credit, a life that didn't need anyone's signature. Because I learned the harsh truth. If you treat love like a contract, don't be shocked when someone terminates you like one. Story 21. I thought I'd finally hit the jackpot with Reed because he didn't just have money, he had influence. The kind of man who could text a restaurant owner and get a table on a holiday. The kind of man who knew judges, bankers, developers. I wasn't just dating him. I was dating the doors he could open. I played it smart. I didn't ask for anything too obvious. I'd say things like, "It's fine, I'll manage," and he'd insist. He loved insisting. Reed needed to feel like the hero rescuing a woman who wasn't like that. Then I made the mistake of getting comfortable. At a party, one of his friends teased him. "Careful, she'll take half your empire." I laughed and said, "Only half?" Like it was a joke. Like I was cute. Reed's smile froze. He didn't correct me. He didn't defend me. He just watched me the rest of the night like I'd finally spoken the truth out loud. 2 days later, he sat me down and said, "I can't ignore red flags." That's the phrase he used. Red flags. Like I was a dangerous product. He cut me off cleanly. The apartment he'd been paying? My name isn't on it, I argued. He calmly replied, "That was the point. My car insurance canceled. My phone line disconnected. He even revoked my guest access to his club, like he wanted the world to know I didn't belong." I panicked and tried to salvage it, not with love, but with leverage. I hinted I could talk. Reed leaned closer and whispered, "You can talk, but I can bury." That shut me up. A year and a half later, Reed went viral in the business world. Sold a company, started a fund, millionaire. People praised his instincts and ability to spot risk early. I watched the interview where he said, "I learned the hard way not to ignore warning signs." My reaction wasn't to expose him. Who would believe me? He had influence and a clean image. So I did something more practical. I stopped chasing doors and started building keys. I took a licensing course, got into real estate, and learned that the best power is the kind you don't need a man to borrow. Story 22. I didn't love Noah. I loved the version of me I became next to him. With Noah, I was classy. I was curated. I was the girl who casually mentioned skiing like it was normal. Noah was rich but anxious. He'd grown up with money and still acted like it could vanish any second. He'd test people constantly. Would you still date me if I had nothing? He asked it like a trap. I always answered perfectly. Of course. I don't care about money. Then I'd kiss him and watch his shoulders relax. The truth? I cared. I cared a lot. The breakup happened over something stupid. He caught me Googling Noah's family net worth on his iPad. I didn't even remember it was synced. He just held the screen up, eyes wide like I'd stabbed him. I tried to laugh it off. It was curiosity. He said, no, it was strategy. He didn't yell. He didn't insult me. He just went dead calm and said, I'm done. Within days, my life started collapsing in small, humiliating ways. The subscription services he'd put on his card? Canceled. The trip deposit? Reversed. My gym membership? Gone. It wasn't the money that hurt the most. It was how fast he erased me from his system. I rebuilt slowly, bitterly. I told myself he'd stay paranoid forever. Then 2 years later, I saw him on a startup news page. His anxiety had turned into an obsession with investing. He'd made a fortune. Millionaire. The comments called him focused and sharp. My reaction was a mix of rage and embarrassment, because I realized he'd been preparing for success while I was preparing to be supported. So I stopped pretending. I started caring about money openly, my money. I learned investing, budgeting, credit. And the first time a guy asked, would you date me if I had nothing? I answered honestly, I'd date someone responsible. Nothing isn't the issue. Dependence is. Story 23. I met Stefan at a wedding, and he looked like a walking solution. Tailored suit, quiet confidence, a condo view he casually mentioned like it was nothing. He asked me out and I said yes before he finished the sentence. Stefan wasn't flashy. He didn't like posting. He didn't like attention. He liked control. I didn't realize that until later. He started giving me help that felt like love. He paid my car repairs, offered to cover my rent until you find your footing, even got me a job interview through a friend. I felt like I was finally being lifted out of struggle. Then, one night, I tried to push for more. We were lying in bed and I said sweetly, you know, most men who love a woman don't let her stress about bills. It was a test. I expected him to respond with reassurance and a transfer. Stefan sat up, turned on the lamp, and looked at me like I'd just revealed my real face. Say that again, he said. I laughed, tried to play it off. He didn't let me. He asked questions, calm and precise. What did I contribute? What did I expect? What did I think love owed me? I got defensive. I said, you're rich. Why does it matter? He said, because you just told me you see me as a function. The next day, the help stopped. Not dramatically, just quietly. And without that help, the cracks in my life widened. I suddenly had to choose between rent and groceries, between pride and calling my parents. 2 years later, I saw Stefan's name on a finance blog. He'd sold a stake in his company and hit millionaire status. The article called him disciplined and emotionally intelligent. My reaction surprised me. I felt grateful and furious at the same time. Grateful because he'd shown me the truth early. Furious because he could walk away without consequences while I had to rebuild from the rubble. But I rebuilt. And when I finally had a steady income, I realized something brutal. Stefan didn't make me stronger. My fear did. He just took away the illusion. Story 24. I always thought the worst thing a rich man could do was cheat. I was wrong. The worst thing is when he looks at you like an invoice. Caleb was a provider by personality. He liked paying. He liked feeling needed. I leaned into it. I'd call him when my tire light turned on. I'd act stressed over bills and he'd swoop in like it proved his worth. Then he got laid off. Not broke, but shaken. His ego took the hit, and suddenly he wasn't in the mood to provide. I expected him to tighten spending but still keep me afloat. Instead, he started asking me to contribute, like we were equals. I hated it. I complained. I said, this isn't what you promised. Caleb stared at me, exhausted, and said, you don't want me. You want the version of me who pays. That line hit so hard I snapped back with something cruel. Well, that version was more useful. He went silent. And in that silence, I felt the relationship end. He cut me off the next week, moved out, and left me with a half-paid lease and a mountain of bills I'd been ignoring. I told myself I'd watched him fall apart. Except he didn't. 2 years later, Caleb was on a podcast. He'd taken the layoff, started a service business, scaled it fast, and bam, millionaire. He talked about the moment I realized I was funding the wrong things. My reaction was immediate. I wanted to message him, to claim I'd been part of his journey, to remind him I existed. But I didn't, because I knew exactly what he'd say, that I was part of what he outgrew. So I did the only thing that didn't feel pathetic. I built my own usefulness, not to impress him, to never again confuse being paid for being valued.